Today, we're diving into the icy world of cold water immersion, also known as taking a cold bath or ice bath after playing sports. It's become a popular recovery practice among athletes, from weekend warriors to elite professionals. They're claiming it helps with everything from muscle soreness to inflammation. But is it really all it's cracked up to be? Let's break down the pros and cons of this popular recovery practice among athletes and see if it's something you should be incorporating into your routine. Let's talk about why people use ice baths. Delayed onset muscle soreness, or DOMS. You crush a workout, feel great, then bam! The next day you can barely move. DOMS is muscle pain and stiffness after strenuous exercise. Cold water immersion may help by constricting blood vessels, reducing inflammation. Less inflammation, less pain, right? More research is needed to confirm its effectiveness. Some studies show promise, others don't. It's not a slam dunk. Okay, so we talked about muscle soreness, but what about overall inflammation? Inflammation is your body's natural response to injury or stress. It's actually a crucial part of the healing process. But chronic inflammation, that's a different story. That's when things can get messy. Chronic inflammation has been linked to a whole slew of health problems, from heart disease to cancer. So keeping inflammation in check is definitely important for overall health and well-being. And that's where cold baths might play a role. Remember how we talked about cold water constricting blood vessels? Well, that constriction can also help reduce inflammation throughout the body. It's like turning down the dial on an overheated system. By reducing blood flow to certain areas, cold water immersion may help to cool things down and reduce inflammation. This can be particularly beneficial for athletes who are constantly pushing their bodies to the limit and dealing with inflammation as a regular part of their training. Let's talk about pain. Not the existential kind, but the physical kind that we experience after a tough workout or an injury. We all know that feeling. The aches, the throbbing, the stiffness. It's not fun. Now imagine if there was a way to temporarily numb that pain and get some relief. Well, that's where cold water immersion comes in. It acts like a natural pain reliever, sort of like an ice pack on steroids. The science behind it is pretty straightforward. When you submerge yourself in cold water, it sends a shock to your system. This shock temporarily numbs the nerve endings in your skin and muscles, reducing the sensation of pain. It's like hitting the pause button on your pain receptors. Now, I'm not saying it's a magic cure-all for all types of pain, but it can be a helpful tool for managing pain and discomfort, especially after intense physical activity. We're talking about cold baths, and you might think, cold? Doesn't that restrict blood flow? And you're right, it does initially. But here's the kicker. Alternating between cold and warm baths, what's called contrast therapy, can actually improve your circulation. It's like giving your blood vessels a workout. The cold constricts them, then the warm expands them, and this back and forth action helps to pump blood more efficiently throughout your body. Think of it like a traffic jam. When you first hit the cold, it's like merging all the cars down to one lane. But then, when you switch to warm, it's like opening up all the lanes and letting the traffic flow freely. This improved circulation can be super beneficial for recovery, as it helps to flush out metabolic waste products that build up in your muscles during exercise. It's like giving your muscles a fresh supply of oxygen and nutrients. Now, we've talked a lot about the physical benefits of cold baths, but what about the mental side of things? Turns out there are some potential mental perks to taking the plunge as well. First off, cold water immersion can be a real shock to the system. It jolts you awake both physically and mentally. It's like hitting the reset button on your brain. This can be especially helpful after a tough workout when you're feeling drained and depleted. The cold can help to clear your head and give you a boost of energy and focus. And let's not forget about the mental discipline it takes to voluntarily submerge yourself in ice-cold water. It's not easy, but pushing through that initial discomfort and resistance can build mental toughness and resilience. It's like a mini test of your willpower. All right, we've talked a lot about the potential upsides of cold baths, but let's be real, there are downsides too. And the biggest one, the most obvious one, is the discomfort. It's cold, like really cold. For some people it's a minor inconvenience, a little shiver here and there, but for others it can be downright painful, especially if you're not used to it. We're talking teeth-chattering, body shaking, gasping for air kind of cold. And it's not just the initial shock either. You have to stay in there for a certain amount of time to reap the supposed benefits, usually around 10 to 15 minutes. And trust me, those minutes can feel like hours when you're submerged in ice-cold water. So, if you're someone who's sensitive to cold or just hates the feeling of being cold, then cold water immersion might not be for you. There are other recovery methods out there that don't involve freezing your butt off. Let's talk about overdoing it. Like anything else in life, you can have too much of a good thing, and that includes cold water immersion. While there are potential benefits to incorporating cold baths into your recovery routine, more doesn't necessarily equal better. In fact, excessive use of cold water immersion could actually backfire. Remember, your body is incredibly adaptable. It's constantly trying to maintain a state of balance, what's known as homeostasis. When you expose your body to cold stress, it triggers a cascade of physiological responses to help you adapt and maintain your core temperature. But if you're constantly bombarding your body with cold stress, it can put a strain on your system and potentially interfere with your body's natural adaptation processes. It's like anything else. You need to give your body a break to rest, recover, and adapt. So if you're using cold water immersion, it's important to do so strategically and not go overboard. So you've conquered the ice bath, you feel invigorated, but then it hits you. Stiffness. That's right. While cold baths can help with muscle soreness, ironically, they can also lead to muscle stiffness, especially if you're not careful. Think about it. Cold temperatures naturally make things contract. Your muscles are no exception. Prolonged exposure to cold water can cause your muscles to tighten up, making them feel stiff and less mobile. It's like leaving a rubber band in the freezer. It becomes less pliable and more prone to snapping. Now, I'm not saying you're going to turn into a human icicle after one cold bath, but it's something to be mindful of. The key here is to make sure you're properly warming up your muscles after a cold plunge. Don't just jump out of the ice bath and hop into your car. Take some time to move around, do some light stretches. Get that blood flowing back into your muscles. Now, for all the talk about the benefits of cold baths, it's important to acknowledge that the scientific evidence is still somewhat mixed. There's a lot of anecdotal evidence, with athletes and fitness enthusiasts swearing by their cold plunges, but when it comes to hard science, there's still work to be done. Many studies on cold water immersion are small and short-term, making it hard to draw definitive conclusions about the long-term effects. So, while there's promising research suggesting benefits for muscle soreness, inflammation, and even mental well-being, more rigorous long-term studies are needed to fully understand how cold water immersion affects the body over time. We need to figure out the optimal protocols, how cold, how long, how often, to maximize benefits and minimize risks. Until then, it's all about personal experimentation and listening to your body. Let's talk about muscle growth, something that's important to a lot of athletes and fitness enthusiasts. You're putting in the work, lifting heavy, pushing your limits, all with the goal of building muscle and getting stronger. But what if I told you that your post-workout ice bath could potentially be sabotaging your gains? Now, before you panic and swear off cold water immersion forever, hear me out. There's a growing body of research suggesting that cold baths might actually blunt the muscle-building response to strength training. The theory is that by reducing inflammation, which is a natural part of the muscle repair and growth process, cold water immersion could potentially interfere with muscle protein synthesis. In other words, it could be slowing down your body's ability to repair those microtears in your muscles and build new muscle tissue. Now, it's not a foregone conclusion that cold baths will completely negate your gains, but it's something to be aware of. So there you have it, the pros and cons of taking a cold bath after sports. The bottom line is this: there's no one-size-fits-all answer. It all comes down to personal preference and your overall training goals. If you're curious, give it a try and see how your body responds. But remember, listen to your body and don't overdo it. Stay cool and see you next time.